we go. Okay. Wonderful. So it always takes me a minute or so to get us across, but we are now going live on Facebook. So welcome to this episode of Unbound Women, our monthly kind of author exploration here at the Unbound Press. I am Nicola Humber, so I'm founder of the Unbound Press, transformational writing mentor and author, and today I'm joined by three of our incredible writers, and we're going to be exploring the theme of how to harness the power of your cyclical nature to write in alignment or create in alignment with your cyclical nature. So it would be great for each of you to introduce yourselves. I'm joined by Ceryn Rowntree, Sarah Wheeler and Tara Jackson, but do you want to let us know who you are and about your books? Some of you got more than one book, so where you are in your process, that would be amazing. So Ceryn, do you want to go first?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Ceryn. As you say, I am author of the upcoming The Divine Feminist, which is a book that is due out in November of this year. And it's all really about how we break down all of those binaries that tell us we must be this or that, all of those inequities that tell us that everything that is on the kind of the yin side or the feminine side of the spectrum is somehow less than. And it's about how we come back to a place of synergy and a place of wholeness within ourselves. I work as a medium and as a therapist on the soul side of everything. So that's me really. And I'm super excited to be here and be talking about this with you ladies.
Yay, your first episode of Unbound Women. Hopefully not your last, Ceryn. It's great to have you here. Thank you. Sarah.
Hi. Real book sounds awesome. Just want to say that, Ceryn. Sounds bloody great. My name's Sarah Wheeler. I'm a yoga teacher, Reiki teacher, and author. I wrote my first book last year. It's called Shadow and Rose, a soulful guide for women recovering from rape and sexual violence. So that's an ebook at the moment, and I'm in the process of kind of padding my way through the self-publishing process to get it into paperback as well. So that's a work in progress at the moment, but it will definitely be coming into handheld proper book form next year. And I'm in the process of writing a book which is called Enough! And that's going to be published by the Unbound Press in the future, maybe later next year. Yeah,
amazing. Thanks, Sarah. Great.
Welcome.
Tara.
Hello everyone, I'm Tara, and amazing to be surrounded by such incredible women. I have two books with the Unbound Press. My first, Embodied, a self-care guide for sensitive souls, came out in 2019. And last year, 2020, my book Embodied Business, which is all about grounding and aligning your business with the chakras and clearing blocks, that came out then. And I have a third coming out next year, hopefully, Embodied Creation. And there's also an oracle card deck on the way right now with the Unbound Press. So there's lots of stuff going on with the Unbound Press. Basically.
And Tara is one of our team members as well, and completely prolific. I'm like, incredible how much comes through.
Amazing.
Really, really exciting. So, obviously, we're all creative beings, and we're all cyclical beings, and writing in alignment with our cyclical nature is a key aspect. It's a key part of the Unbound writing process. But as I was thinking about this earlier today, I was thinking, God, for such a huge part of my life, I didn't have that awareness that I was a cyclical being, literally no awareness at all. And it was only, really when I started my own business and started to have that freedom there was the potential freedom for me to operate in the way that was more cyclical. that I started to notice really how bound I was and really stuck in that whole 9 to 5, Monday to Friday piece, like, you know, just going for the whole of the year with a few weeks holiday. And it was only through coming into contact with work, like of Lisa Lister and Miranda Gray, like they were two of my main kind of teachers in that area, that I started to, you know, appreciate and honor my cyclical nature. So I'm really curious about like how that awareness started coming through for you, or has it always been there for you? Who'd like to dive in first with that?
I'm happy to.
Yeah, thanks.
That's all right.
Yeah, please.
So it was definitely a very intuitive thing. I mean, I grew up on the equator and I moved to London when I was 18. And that kind of contrast in seasons, which was so marked compared to, yes, we get seasons on the equator, but they're nothing like the Northern Hemisphere, of course. So just that shock to my system and not being able to handle that, I think in myself, it was just really a shock. I noticed my cyclical nature in a year so much more, and that kind of highlighted the, you know, the cyclical nature in a month as well. And yeah, so basically that's when I really became aware of it. And like you, Nicola, having to work a 9 to 5, or was it, well, university at first, being on all the time, you know, there was no consideration taken for when I was menstruating or when I might be feeling not up for it. So yeah, that's kind of how my journey developed from that point, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Kind of that contact with the like more obvious seasons is what kind of initiated that. Thanks, Tara.
Yeah, I could definitely speak to that as well. Curious to know where you grew up on the equator. That sounds incredibly exotic and exciting, Tara. Where was it, incidentally?
Kenya, and I'm actually here right now.
So,
So, and that's
oh my God.
my cyclical writing.
Yes. So cool. Awesome. Yeah, so similar thing, I think. And I would be surprised if it wasn't like the majority of women who kind of relate to like a similar story, not necessarily because you've lived by the equator, but because of that kind of you're on, like you'll go all the time. It was exactly what it was like when I was at university. It was at drama school where I did my acting degree, and it was really intense. It was really like a blood, sweat and tears course that I was on. I mean, full of like lovey, dramatic people anyway. But it just became even more intense, having lots of women around each other who generally had no idea that we felt the way that we felt, because we were cyclical creatures, and would all have these times where we'd like rub each other up the wrong way, or someone's energy would be like more sort of out there than somebody else's who just wanted to be quiet. And there was more women than men on my course. And I think those kind of feminine energies, they really filled up like the rehearsal spaces that we'd be in. And sometimes it would be like, I just have to go outside for a minute and just take a minute. I just need a breather because it's intense. And I don't think at the time, like being sort of 18 or 19, nobody could really articulate what it was that actually had us so out of tune with ourselves, that it was so intense all the time. Because had we been really in tune with the cyclical nature, be it, you know, the menstrual cycle, or be it like a moon cycle that some people kind of resonate with more, I think we'd have been able to kind of give each other like more space to be able to be with how we were feeling, rather than it just being this kind of hotbed of trying to create our results and get our scripts learned and get our productions done, whilst also trying to function as a female as well. And yeah, like not that long after that, going into the business, it's really similar, super competitive, you're just on go all the time. Doesn't really work for my personality style either. I thought it did, but that was just kind of like I learned to be that way to try and make it. And when that started kind of falling away from me, when I had to step away from like the 9 to 5 job in a marketing job that I had further down the line, it wasn't 9 to 5, it was like 9 till 10 every day, which is insane on so many levels. When I came away from that, I was like, this is unsustainable. What can I do to actually restore myself? And again, came into contact with the works of sort of older women who were kind of taking a mentoring role in life and sort of showing like, you're not supposed to be on go all the time. Guess what? It doesn't work because it's not supposed to. And yeah, that was, you know, the rest is history, really. That's kind of just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, and that's when the journey begins, really, isn't it? It's like when it's
yeah, it's like, oh, I'm here now, go.
yeah.
Down you go.
Yeah, I don't need to be like, you know, go all the time. Wow, thanks, Sarah. Karen,
Isn't it funny when you were just saying there, Sarah, about, you know, being 18, 19 and being at uni? I was thinking the other day actually about, I remember when I was maybe 16, 17, and I worked at a job as a student in McDonald's, of all places. And I remember the older ladies who worked there would say things, and they would sort of talk about different things going on with their body and say, oh, I know that I'm due on my period because blah, blah, blah. And at that age, I'd be listening to them thinking, but how do you know? Like, my period just comes. It just happens. And what else does it mean? And almost, because we're not taught it. And I guess one of my hopes for the future is that we will be taught this, you know, the whole world will be taught this. But so I was kind of the same as both of you, or all of you ladies, I guess, in that, you know, I left uni having been a good girl all the way through uni, and then went into the world of work, working obscenely long hours, and found myself, kind of came to a head when I found myself in a job that was incredibly toxically masculine, incredibly, you know, toxically masculine in terms of not just the sort of sexism there, but also the hours we were working, the whole culture that was so massively overbalanced in that direction. And I was working too hard. I was drinking too much just to switch off on a night time, because there was no balance. There was no balance at all. And for me, it was, as you said, Nicola, it was Lisa's book. It was Lisa Lister's Code Red. That was the thing that somebody I was following on Instagram recommended it. And so I remember I bought a moon cup and Lisa's Code Red. And
boom.
my life changed. My life entirely changed. And I remember picking this book up and not only thinking, oh, this makes sense now, but it was like somebody had just handed me the key to my body. It was like somebody had handed me the key to my whole energy, to my whole, well, as it turns out, to my life's work, I guess, but to everything, had just handed me the key to myself. And I suddenly, you know, it wasn't just the energetics of how many hours a day I needed to work and when I needed to slow down. It was also the things like, you know, I'd had boyfriends in the past who would complain about my moods, and I just assumed that was me. And then as I started cycle tracking, I realized, yeah, that was me for 3 days out of every month. And the way I'd been defining myself had so often been based on a couple of days a month that I just assumed was me all the time. And then when I sat back and looked at, you know, the results of cycle tracking and the results of this cyclical living, I'd go, no, this isn't me. It almost gave me the freedom to entirely redefine not just my life, but my whole self, which was groundbreaking.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, there's something about like our power, isn't there? And like, I'm talking about harnessing the power of our cyclical nature, and it, you know, it's allowing ourselves to access the full spectrum of who we are, rather than defining ourselves in these really narrow ways, usually negatively, because those are the things, because, you know, it is these small pockets of time when we are showing up in a different way, and people notice it and criticize us for it. So thanks so much for sharing that, Karen. So when it comes to like creating and writing, like writing specifically, what's that process been like allowing your cyclical nature to come through in your writing practice, like particularly as you're writing your books?
Yeah, I can speak to that first, if that's okay. Just going back to what Karen said, I think the combination of writing in like a cyclical way, that's been sort of groundbreaking for me, and really like deconditioned and untangled out of that way of being like on the go all the time, and then wanting that kind of go all the time to map itself onto like every day where you think you should be doing some writing. It's like, oh shit, I haven't written anything today. Oh no, that's really, really bad. Why didn't I write something? Oh, I should just make myself sit down for an hour and do something now. And it's taken away all of that kind of quote unquote like have to out of loads of stuff in my life, and very definitely writing for one. So yeah, I feel like when I'm like just kind of coming off the back of my period and going into that more follicular and then going towards the ovulatory stage, like writing comes super easily. So I try and make the most of that without kind of setting like a time limit and being like, right, I'm going to do 2 hours solid writing. I just get my pen, paper, or my laptop if I prefer, and I'm just like, right. And in no time, like a lot of time will have gone by and I'll be like, this is really flowing, it's easy, it's just coming out, and don't know whether I'm going to use this or not, and maybe I'll just save this in a file somewhere else and kind of jigsaw puzzle put it together, which is a lot of how I've kind of put my 2 books together, in fact, was that kind of jigsaw puzzle sort of way, taking that kind of, that's cyclical as well, isn't it, like taking the linear kind of style out of like, do this bit, then that bit, then that bit, in the little pockets of the spaces between the linear and the cyclical, we kind of get into those like nooks and crannies, I think, of where the words may have like escaped us before, and then they can find their way out because we've given ourselves the space to actually feel into those places and then get the words to come out on the page or on the laptop. Yeah, so that's the creative process. I'm like, I'll harness that sort of upbeat, more sociable kind of feeling around the, you know, the early sort of stage of the cycle, and then I know that I can allow myself to back off a little bit from feeling like I have to create like writing and content and stuff, and maybe sort of tune back into like the energy of the book, or like the kind of background planning of the book, going like more towards the end of the cycle, because I find that my concentration for longer tasks is better when I'm going more towards my bleed. Like when I bleed, I'm like cannot barely focus on anything. But in the days leading up to it, I've got a lot of like staying power for like long tasks. So that kind of helps me get the balance and be like, it's creative time. Oh no, it's not. Don't pressure yourself to do that now. Now it's just like in the background, like laying the foundation time. Yeah.
That's amazing. And I guess that awareness has come through over a period of time.
Oh yeah, like it wasn't just like a straight away kind of thing. I think I was definitely in the space of like, when I first started writing Shadow and Rose, I was like, I've just got to get this book out. I've just got to get it out. I've got to get this like off my chest and off my heart. And then like further into that process, I get to those points of being like, I'm spent, like I'm exhausted writing this. And it's a tiring topic to write about anyway. So self-care has got to kind of come before even going to the page or the laptop, just purely because of the content of the book. But it was in that process when I kind of gave myself the opportunity to see how my writing was going, rather than just trying to get it done. It kind of got more revealed to me like, oh, this is when I'm more fluidly creating and the words come easier. Or actually, no, when I'm closer to my period, I'm like, don't feel the draw to kind of write such long form. Like maybe I can just rejig the structure a little bit and stuff. So yeah, it was definitely a work in progress that kind of got figured out for myself.
Amazing. Yeah.
And I'm still learning it. I don't have myself down as like an expert in it at all. I definitely get those voices, those like patriarchal voices of like, you're behind, you should be doing more of this because you want this out by this time and it's not gonna happen. And you know, it's all just blah, isn't it? Blah blah.
Yeah. And we can try and force it, but you know, then I love how you kind of describe getting into the nooks and crannies, and we miss that opportunity, I think, when we're just like, no, I've said I'm going to do it by then, I'm just going to kind of push through and do it. Actually, I just literally can't do that now. I just go on. Anyone else?
And I think it's really interesting that listening to you talk there, Sarah, because I'm entirely the opposite. And I wonder, in terms of my cycle, and I wonder if that will change. I wonder if on my next book I will be different, you know, because the way that this book came into the world in comparison to the first book I published many moons ago was entirely different. So I wonder if the way my cycle needs to be expressed through writing will change with every book, because for me it was the opposite, in that I kind of couldn't go deep enough when I was in that follicular stage, when I was in that ovulatory stage. So then there was a lot of notes, there was a lot of jotting down. And then I'd kind of think, right, I'll return to that later, it'll be fine. Whereas once I got into that sort of premenstrual phase, I would really kind of sink into the book, and I'd be able to go really deep with it. And just almost, I wrote most of this book sitting on a beanbag with Schitt's Creek on in the background. So I'd basically just sit under a blanket on my beanbag, physically writing the book.
Awesome.
And when I got to my bleed time, actually what I found was that there were some of the topics that, you know, the rest of the month I just couldn't write about them, because that patriarchal voice would be shouting, that ego voice would be shouting, that you should, you must, you cannot, you must not would be shouting. But when I was in the bleed, it all went quiet. I was just so deep in it. And at that point I was bleeding with the dark moon and ovulating with a full moon, so it was really deep. And I would just go really deep, and almost, I mean, there are bits of my book that are almost entirely channeled, and those bits came while I was bleeding, because it just became so much easier to just shut out all the noise and get on with what needed to be written. But then again, next time around, maybe that'll be entirely different. So isn't it fascinating how all of our different cycles are different, and they need different things, and the different projects need different things. And I just think it's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, it's properly mind-blowing. Like I really hear what you're saying. I resonate with that about like the deeper stuff comes from the bleed. And it's like, I feel like sometimes I can't even journal when I'm on my bleed, because it's just literally coming up and out of my womb, and I'm like, it hasn't even quite traveled to my fingers yet to come through to writing it down. Like it's there and it bubbles, and then I sort of have to like wait a little bit longer, like to the end of the bleed, and then it can kind of get expressed, and I'm like like this. So yeah, that not dark like negative, but like that darkest, like deepest place where you go, that's really beautifully expressed, Ceryn.
Yeah, I love that you shared that, because I was going to say that literally my two books have been opposite in terms of how I've written them when in my cycle, and also seasonally really affects me. And that cycle, like I'll come back to that. So my second book, Embodied Business, I wrote here in Kenya, and it came out in less than 3 weeks. And it was the winter here, the winter months, but it was that I write better in the dark times, in the autumn, winter seasons. But also the energy is different here. And I feel like I am possibly not more creative, but stuff flows more easily for me here, definitely. And I am able to write much quicker, connect more deeply within. Interestingly, I don't know, I'm still, there's not one answer, but it does change all the time. And the cyclical nature of it is a bit all over the place. And each book has been different completely. And I love that. But there is a definite depth, in that dark time, which really allows me to go into the book more deeply. And I love that.
Oh yeah, I hadn't thought. I obviously know the creation and I've seen that the creation process is so different for each book, but in terms of like cyclically, and when you feel called to write different books, that's so interesting. I mean, would you say, each of you, that it's your menstrual cycle that is most influential? Like Tara, there you mentioned seasons, but does that tend to be the most kind of impactful cycle on your creativity and your writing? I mean, there are going to be other influences, but go on.
When I was in the Northern Hemisphere writing Embodied, it was my menstrual cycle massively. But coming here, it's the seasons of the year and the days. That affects me a lot more in many ways. It's really interesting to be back in it, having grown up with it, and then to be back sort of 20 years later and to experience it from this perspective. So that's what's affecting my cycle the most right now, and how I write.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think for me it's predominantly the menstrual cycle. Let me just try and think when it was. I think 2018 I came off the pill, having been on it for like a long number of years, and that was also like early 2018 was around the time where I kind of just started to like play about with the idea that I might one day be able to write something that shock horror people might possibly want to read, and was just like busy journaling and stuff. And so it's kind of been at this point in my life, like in my sort of mid to late 30s, that's the sort of constant, is the menstrual cycle, and that definitely underpins like the writing process for me. I think the moon probably more influences, or has an equal impact on like actions taken around business. Feeling like the growth of the moon and the going down, and when to promote stuff, and you know, what have you. So many cool things that you can do around that. But yeah, because the books that I've been writing are so connected with women, feminine, similar, I probably could speak for all of us, like some of the wounds that we have around being women as well, like that the blood influences it, I think, very deeply.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah. And it's interesting, isn't it? And I think for me, yes, the menstrual cycle is probably the biggest part. And I thought it was really interesting what you just said there, Sarah, about coming off the pill, because so I started trying to write this book years ago in 2017, 2018. And at that time, I actually had the coil fitted, and I physically could not write. I would sit down with my laptop and go, there's nothing, there are no words to come out. And it wasn't until I had that removed that I was suddenly able to go, oh, everything, it's flowing now. Words, I mean, the book still didn't come for a while, but words were able to flow. And it was quite interesting how utterly blocked I felt creatively as a result of that. And maybe that's not the same for everyone, but for me, it certainly was. So I think my menstrual cycle is probably the biggest cyclical influence, but I'm quite influenced by the movement of the planets, any sort of more generally, you know, I pay attention to that a lot. And I will kind of, if I know there's a particularly good aspect going on in the sky, I'll say, right, okay, today I'm going to make a point of putting some time aside for writing, because at the very least it's going to influence a little bit of inspiration perhaps. So I will kind of try to pay attention to what's going on in the sky as well as what's going on, you know, within my body.
Yeah. So many aspects to it. I know.
You get so wrapped up in it, couldn't you?
Well, this is the thing. And, you know, I would never want this to be like, you know, a source of overwhelm, like, oh my goodness, there's so many things that I can take into account when it comes to my writing, and how do I figure out, I mean, it really is just tuning in on each particular day, or you know, whenever it is throughout the day, and it's like, well, what do I feel called to do, and trusting that. I mean, for me personally, I mean, I was on the pill, the contraceptive injection, and you know, even when I started my business and when I started to come into contact with this type of work and, you know, this type of awareness about my cyclical nature and about my menstrual cycle, and I was like, I can't be having that injection anymore, because it had, you know, completely disconnected me from that. And just realizing how blocked and how numb I had been, and like, you know, my true self was completely like somewhere way down under the surface from having that injection. I only had that I think, you know, for a couple of years or something, but that was just mind-blowing for me to like notice the difference and start coming back into myself and being able to experience my cyclical nature. And now, because I had my last bleed, well, I don't know, I'm assuming it was my last bleed last September, so I've had a year with no menstrual cycle, over a year now. So it's been really interesting for me to, because that definitely used to influence me most, be tuning more into the moon cycle, and also the cycle of the seasons as well, as Tara has said. So that's a whole other process of discovery, like the kind of perimenopause, menopause kind of journey. Like having, well, I'm finding it one of like really being called to trust myself and my experience even more deeply. So yeah, fascinating.
I love that. I was going to say, it's like it gives you permission just to be whatever you are and how you write. You hear so many authors I looked up to were like, you have to sit down every day and write. I know we all heard that, but it not work.
No, you don't.
Exactly, at all. And actually what really helps me is, you know, like you taught, Nicola, is connecting to the soul, the essence of your book. And I find that it honors you and your cyclical nature when you do that. It's like it works with you. So that's what I've uncovered. And there isn't one way of doing that, of course. So, that's pretty magical as well when it comes to writing.
Trust is such a key piece here. And yet working with your book, like your book will respond in whatever way you kind of invite it to. And I mean, I'd heard all of that advice, like when I came to write my first book, you've just got to like suck it up basically and show up every day. And I kind of get that, like you want to have a dedicated practice.
Sure.
So I'm interested to hear how you balance that, allowing your cyclical nature and also showing up for your writing and for your book.
I think for me, it's again, it comes back to balance, and it comes back to tuning in every day. And I think this is all of this, isn't it? Everything we're saying for anybody who is undertaking this journey for themselves, what we're saying is only ever a starting point. It's only ever something to explore and go into for yourself. And I think for me, it's a bit of a balance, because I am somebody who kind of needs a bit of a whip crack from myself to go, no, you're going to at least try this every day. Otherwise, it'll be 6 months down the line and I'll have not done anything. So I need a little bit of that. But I think it was for me, it has been opening up that space to say, right, this may be a time for writing, or it may be a time for just meditating with your book, with the essence of your book, as you say, Tara, or it may be a time for, I don't know, curling up with a cup of cacao and just chilling out and dreaming into your book a little bit. Who knows? It was kind of opening up that space every day for me and my book, and then seeing where that space led to. And 9 times out of 10, as I went through the process, that space would lead into actually writing it. But I sort of also found that certainly, again, with this book, more than anything I've ever written, it very much felt like there were seasons of writing the book as well. And as the book came to a place of sort of almost being ready, it wanted me to go in there every day. It wanted to be, it was kind of that readiness to be born. Whereas in the early stages, it was just there was a bit of a quickening, and then it would settle back for a little while. So it was going with the process of the book as much as the process of me, and just opening up the space for every day, and then letting that space go where it needed to go, I think.
Love that. Thanks, Ceryn.
Yeah, that's just really beautifully expressed. I love that. And I love it. 9 times out of 10, the book will kind of unfold itself after you've created the space. So like it will let you write a little bit, and then it's like, oh, that's all we need to do for today. Can you just let that go and be like, we did some writing and that's it. You didn't write a million words. Who cares? Go back to enjoying your cup of tea or whatever you're having. So that getting the balance of that kind of daily, or maybe not quite daily, but that regular writing practice. And for me, what's really helped with that is similar to you, Ceryn, like kind of making it more like a meditative practice. I've spoken about this before. I know you and I have talked about it, Nicola. Like I work well with creating when I've taken a yoga nidra practice, gone down into that space, into the void. And what's so amazing about yoga nidra is like one of the yoga lineages that it comes from is called Laya yoga, and Laya means to dissolve or to disappear. So it's very unbinding, dissolving and disappearing all the stuff that sits on top of what really, really, really wants to come out. And so I've kind of, again, trusting, like what you just said, like trusting what wants to come out of my pen after a yoga nidra session. It might be 2 sentences, it might be 1 word, it might be a little bit of prose or some kind of thing that might resemble a poem. I don't really like to label stuff. It just kind of is how it is, right? And being like, right, that's what needed to come through. Maybe that will be in the book, maybe it won't, but it's helped to harness that daily, or possibly not daily, writing practice, making it be part of like a sort of ritualized experience for yourself, rather than like, okay, I've got to do my writing because my mentor said I should do, and I said to my mentor that I would do my writing, and for the high jump if I don't do it, I think there's a lot to be said for doing what you said you're going to do, 1,000,000%, particularly like when other people are involved, but doing it for the sake of it, just because you said you're going to do it, not particularly healthy for oneself.
Yeah, absolutely. How about you,
No,
Tara?
I absolutely agree with what you're both saying. And Ceryn, what you said, about the different things that the book asks you to do, like maybe it's walking and dictating one day, or whatever form that expression wants to come out, or sometimes I even just paint, actually, and then some words will come from that later as well. And each book was very different in how I approached it with my cyclical nature. But it's like the second one, which is the last one, obviously, it was following the season of the book, and it wanted to come quickly, and it came quickly, and I really honored that. Probably it honored my cyclical nature too, but the book's its season was come out, like it has to be written now, and it has to come out when it wants to come out, so I honored that. And this next one is very different, and it's coming in little, it's kind of whispering at me, so I kind of getting to feel how that's going to work with my cyclical nature, actually. And I haven't maybe fully allowed it to come in yet, because I'm like, no, just let's see. But when it does, I'm curious as to how that will want to play with, how we'll form our relationship and how we'll work together, I guess, to bring the book. So that's,
because it is a relationship, isn't it? And it's like, you get to play together, you and your book. So it's not all about what your book wants, although we have to be ready for it as well. And I was just thinking as you were speaking, Tara, like, talking about how your book came through in 3 weeks, and it was pretty much fully formed when it came through, but there's always, like, that's not the whole story, is it? I think sometimes people look at purely the writing process and think, okay, that's how long it took to write the book. That was it. That was kind of when the book was being created. But there's always so much more happening, like under the surface, like, what you have to experience and the insights that you gain in the run up to actually creating your book and it being able to come through. And I love what you said, Ceryn, about like the different like seasons of the book. Like at the beginning, it's a bit more of a dance, and it's like, it can be backwards and forwards. And then it does seem to get to a stage where it kicks in. It's like, right, now you're gonna.
I love the way you just described it there, Nicola. I'm not sure if you said it, Tara, and Nicola was sort of paraphrasing, but when you described it there as a relationship, because I think there's this, and this is what Unbound does brilliantly, because there's this idea out there that to write a book must be quite perfunctory, that it's very output driven, it's very there is a process, this is the process, everyone can write a book, they just have to follow this. And I think what you do so beautifully, which is so true, is that it is a relationship. You've got to get to know them, you've got to sort of woo your book a little bit and have your book trust you to hold them and to write them and to bring them into the world, and vice versa. You've got to trust your book to take you on the journey that it's going to take you on, and then you've got to go with that. Then you get to points where you're kind of dancing a little bit, and then you're all in, and you go through all of the pain with it, and the challenge with it, and the kind of, I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but the tearing your hair out with it on some days. And you really have to build that relationship with your book and recognize it as being not just about the output. I have this book that I can hold in my hand, but actually that book is so much more than what I hold in my hand. And it's not just output, it's the whole journey, it's the whole relationship.
Absolutely. Oh yeah. And when you've allowed yourself to trust and create in this cyclical way, I think it infuses the book with this really powerful quality, which your reader can feel. Like when we're just showing up and just like, oh, I'm doing this because I've said I should, and I'm just trying to get it out there. Like our reader, or whether it's a book or something in our business, whatever it is we've created, like people can feel that quality. I'm sure we've all like felt it ourselves, when we've come into contact with something. And also, if we've created something from that place, like we're aware that it kind of carries that icky energy. So we're doing a service to our readers as well when we allow ourselves to create in this cyclical way.
Definitely. I really like that. The relationship analogy is so true. And like relationships do have ups and downs, and there's parts that feel maybe like quite fallow and a bit like, oh, it's sort of okay, like nothing's really happening, like there's nothing to complain about, but it's just, you know, it's just a bit like meh at the moment. And then that has like its peaks and troughs when it comes into like a different phase in the relationship. And it makes me think of like a couple of months back with Shadow and Rose. I was waiting on, it felt like I was waiting for ages. And in terms of like time, it was quite a long time, but it felt longer because I was like, I just want my book to be able to have the space that it needs to have so that it can help and empower the people that need to have it. But we just need to, like, me and the book, like we just need to hold it down for a bit so that this person who is totally brilliant and massively skilled, is a, you know, proper therapeutic clinician person, can go through it with a fine-tooth comb and give the feedback plus testimony that they said they were going to give about it, and be like, I've got to trust that this is now folding out in its right time, because this lady wouldn't do anything other than do it as properly as she could for the honor of the people that we want to be reading the book. So yeah, it was kind of just like a sit tight, trust it, it's happening, it's going to come back to you, and then it does, and you're like, oh, now we're going into a new phase in my book relationship, because now it means we're going into a different process in the writing, the creation, the publishing, or, you know, whatever it happens to be that comes next from the previous phase. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So as we're coming up to the end, like, this is something we could talk about probably all day. There's so many different layers to it. But if somebody is writing a book at the moment, or creating anything at the moment, and they want to do that more in alignment with their cyclical nature, what's kind of the one piece of advice you would give to them?
I think self-awareness. Just self-awareness, your own cycle, how you work, when works best for you, in terms of when you connect, create, you know, you'll just get to know yourself and what works for you, and know that it will change, and that's okay too. Really honor your needs.
Perfect.
I don't think I could say anything other than that. I absolutely agree, Tara. I think it's really about tuning into you, and everything we've said, you can sort of take that with a pinch of salt and bear it in mind, but at the end of the day, it all comes back to what works for you, and perhaps that means, you know, really sitting with yourself and getting to know yourself as you move through this process, and allowing that to lead you as much as anything else.
I think, like not feeling like you have to be sort of married to like one idea about how you're going to get to know the cyclical process. Like try different stuff. Like maybe it's your menstrual cycle that informs you more, maybe it's the moon, maybe it's the seasons, maybe it's like just the different times of day that inform you as well. Like, is it best morning, afternoon, or evening? And that can apply to loads of stuff, like not just writing, you know, that can be loads of stuff in life, you know. And I think if people are kind of coming into this from a place of like, oh my God, I wouldn't even know where to begin with like knowing my cyclical nature, couple of little book recommendations. I'm sure you people know these books already, but Moonology by Yasmin Boland. I literally was looking at this today, like no joke, here it is right next to me. And yeah, Code Red by Lisa Lister as well.
Yeah. Can I add Wild Power to that? Because that's one of, I even have that here. Yeah.
Definitely do.
Wild Power is a really good one as well.
Yeah.
I haven't read that. Who's that by?
I've got it right here. Can I grab it?
Mine's in the other room, or I'd grab it. But yeah,
I've seen it, but I haven't.
Really good Alexandra one. Pope.
Oh yes, yeah, I've read other books by Alexandra Pope. Yeah, amazing. Yeah, any other book recommendations before we finish?
In the Flow by Alyssa Vitti. Similar to Code Red, but much more on a kind of scientific, physical level, rather than, you know, Code Red's amazing, I absolutely love it, and it definitely gets into the kind of spiritual side as well as the more kind of grounded body stuff to do with the menstrual cycle. But yeah, In the Flow really breaks it down into like how your cycle's affecting your brain, your microbiome, and how that can have the vice versa effect as well. Yeah, love it.
Amazing. Karen, did you have anything
I think the only other, I mean, I could go on with book recommendations for about a year, you know what I'm like. But I think the only other one I'd add is The Holy Wild by Danielle Dulski, which is not so much about the cyclical nature, but it is about the kind of elemental energies. It's about how those manifest within us and within our lives. And it's such a beautiful opportunity to reconnect with that part of us, with the waxing and waning of the moon within us, I guess, which is, oh, I love that book so much. It's beautiful. So yeah,
I'm going to read that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a wonderful audio book as well. She has a really good reading voice. So highly recommend.
Gorgeous.
Highly recommend that one.
Thank you. And if anyone's got any other recommendations, pop them below this video, because we'll all be like,
we'll read them.
Yeah, exactly. We're writers. We love our books. So recommendations are always welcome. And we would love to hear from you, for those watching, you know, your insights around your own cyclical nature. And, you know, we've all shared our own experiences here, but what's come through really strongly is such an individual thing, and it does shift and change. And I think it's really important to recognize that, rather than expecting us to, you know, always be kind of operating in the same way, like month in, out, season in, season out. So as we close, it would be great to hear, from each of you, what's the best way for people to find you and connect with you if they're feeling the call?
For me, you can find me periodically, cyclically, see what I did there, on Instagram, You're Enough Yoga with Sarah Wheeler. The website as well is you'reenoughyoga.com.
Amazing. Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, for me, it's also Instagram at empathpreneurs.
Fantastic. I love that. Simple. Thanks, Tara. Karen.
And Instagram probably is the best one for me as well, where it's simply my name. So it's Ceryn Rowntree. And that will also lead you to anywhere else you want to look to.
Amazing. And Karen's book is out very soon in November. So we're very excited about that. Oh, well, thank you so much for joining me today. As ever, it's been a pleasure to have this conversation, this exploration. I always receive so much from you know, when we connect like this. So thank you so much. And yeah, looking forward to carrying on the conversation here in the comments and in future episodes as well. So thanks for joining.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Bye, ladies.
Bye.
Bye.